Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Are Fear. This is your host, Rita, and
Leo.
welcome to our sixth episode.
Episodes.
It's been such a ride, and I want to just shout out everybody who has been so present, engaging with us on our socials, answering the questions that we post, and even just listening to our content and sharing feedback. We see you, we appreciate you, and we really, really celebrate you. Thank you so much. For today's episode, what are
It
we
is
discussing?
the what should I say? A very touchy subject that I feel sometimes we speak about it but not really act on because it's a very difficult thing to do. I don't think it's easy for anyone, and so today we are speaking about boundaries. I know in our 20s we are trying to figure out who we are. We are trying to figure out our careers. We are literally like very new to a lot of things,
Yeah.
and sometimes people might overstep. People might put you in an uncomfortable situation. You might be at work and then a colleague is pushing you around, and you feel like you don't have so much say because maybe you're a new person, or maybe you're in a new relationship and you want to be in a relationship and your partner does not respect your boundaries, or even friendship. I feel like for friendship it's a very challenging time because now all of you are having all these different things.
Yeah.
You're having work, and sometimes people can tend to overstep that. And so so today we want to dive in and learn more about boundaries. How can we set them? What we have been working on. And so we're looking forward to hearing your comments, what you think about boundaries, how you have set boundaries in your life, who you have set those boundaries with. Yeah. So welcome. So let's start. What do you think a boundary is?
I don't think I've ever defined it, but it's in my head. It's like a limit or a point up to which somebody can associate with you, or can interact with you,
Yeah.
or like they can have a say on something you're doing. So
Yeah.
like the limit you put, such that past this you're not allowed to come in, or to give your opinion, or to demean my opinion, or it's just, for me, it's just like a limit. So you can't go past this, because past this, that is me entirely. So if it's a decision, I will allow you to give me your opinions, but past this, it is, at the end of the day, it's me who makes that decision, or it's me who takes that leap.
Yeah.
You can say every other thing, but up to some degree, that's my space.
Yeah.
That's my choice.
Yeah.
So I think that's a boundary, like up to a limit, or a limit which you put that nobody else can pass, and it's only your space.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, I had written down something that I'd come across with, and they're saying boundary. It's creating physical and emotional space between you and others. And this space might not even be a decision, might even be someone making a joke that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It can be someone doing an action. For them, they might think it's a good thing, but for you, that's not how you receive it. It's also setting, I also feel like there's a level of, I know all the boundaries you set are you for yourself, but I also think you also set boundaries with yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, maybe if you're not a good timekeeper, then you can set a boundary with yourself, like you cannot be making people late, or if you are not eating healthy, you can be like, I need to be eating more vegetables and stuff like that, right? So I think it's just creating a space between you and others. And I also think somehow you can also create that space between you and who you want to grow into.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how I'd want to view it. So how have you worked around boundaries before in your life until
I think it's not been like a clear, I have set a boundary, or like past hapa usipite, past hapa don't do this. It's not, I haven't had the definition of okay, Rita, umeweka boundary hapa. But it's just been something that if it makes me uncomfortable, I won't try and keep it in my space or in my life. I'll try to disassociate. If it doesn't give me peace, if it just pisses me off or just disturbs me, or like it's not something that when I think about it, for me, I associate it with peace or serenity or anything like that, then I'll be like, maybe I can, if it's a person I can avoid, I can blue tick, I can block, such situations. If it's family, I'll try not to be in the same place with them for some time. So I haven't really had in mind that I'm putting a boundary, but I know that if something is disturbing me or does not give me peace, I will put space. So I think that's how I've been going around boundaries, quote unquote. Up to now. I think that's how I view it. Yeah. And even just blind, like when somebody says something that is uncomfortable and they expect you to have a reaction, not reacting the way they are expecting, is also a sort of boundary. Because I had a guy in one of the areas, in one of the companies that I used to work in, who used to make very snide remarks about a woman's body, or like somebody dating. Oh, you're dating and the way you're young. Oh, you have a tattoo and the way you're young. Oh, like things around my body. And I found that when it reached a certain point, and I was like, I would not tolerate a conversation. So if we were having coffee, there's a place we used to have snacks. I would avoid this at this time yenye anaenda hapo. I wouldn't go. I'd move my work around how how his calendar looks like. I would work with his calendar so that I disassociate with that. So I think that's one of the ways I've done boundaries, like putting space, lots of space between things that just do not give me peace.
For me, it has been that. But also, the times I've had communicate and just say, I'm not happy with this, or I don't think this is fair, or I don't appreciate the way you said this to me, or be like, I'm not in agreement, or I don't think I'll be able to do this. Which sometimes people have said that I've ended up saying that I'm a bit authoritative. Or I'm a bit stern because of it. But it's not because I'm stern, it's because if I'm uncomfortable with something, I'll communicate that feeling to you. And if it makes me whatever you're doing to me makes me uncomfortable, I'll say it makes me uncomfortable. And so if you are not able to receive that from a place of maybe this is not what she wants, maybe what could make her comfortable, or what makes her comfortable, and then we can be able to interact better in that space without you thinking that I'm stern. So I've had circumstances either I'm authoritative or I'm very stern, but it's because sometimes when I feel somebody has done something or said something, I'll actually speak up and address it. I remember also, like, in school, being a prefect, people would like stand and like say, oh, kuna watu, and I knew they wanted to talk about me, but they couldn't address me. And so I used to say, if you have an issue with me, just come straight to me, right? And I think that's one of the things it has really maybe helped me with being able to voice out, because being in a place where in leadership people can want to overstep, but you need to be like, no, this is where the line is, in terms of maybe my responsibility and how that interaction would go. There are cases also where I have walked out from mainly I think it's people in relationship spaces that I've not felt comfortable in, and I've maybe not communicated, because for boundaries, for before you leave, you need to have communicated that this is not okay, or this is making you feel. And mostly for me, it's usually when I'm stuck between people that were affecting my life at that point, and I couldn't communicate it communicate it because I know it wouldn't have been received well, or I thought it would not have been received well.
Yeah.
And so what I did is just put space. So like this is it, and that's it. So just putting space between situations, or just putting a huge space between me and those people, so that I may be able to attain peace. Yeah. And it's because I knew the kind of influence they would have. If I had communicated that, it would be a whole other circus. So for sometimes walking away for me meant that I do not want a huge fight.
Yeah.
Part of my personality is that I don't like confrontations. I'm a direct person, but I don't like confrontation. I don't like where, and people shouting. I don't like that. So part of me walking away is usually avoiding a higher confrontation. So I'd rather just walk away from that situation and having to say something that I know with how I've interacted with that person, their perception of whatever I might say would might bring out issues. Yeah. Which area in your life do you think you have had the hardest you have had the hardest time putting a boundary?
I think the hardest would be with family. I think that has been the hardest, especially because you don't grow up thinking that you need to have like defined boundaries with family. And then in as much as boundaries are not just for things that would hurt you, it's just for like specifying this is my space, this is your space. You don't expect or kind of come to a conclusion that you need to have boundaries with your family, because they're supposed to be your inner circle. Like that's the perception. They're supposed to be your inner circle. They're supposed to be respectful of what you want, what you choose, and things like those. So I feel like family is the hardest to put boundaries with, and also because we've grown up in an African society.
Yeah.
Like where or when am I going to sit down with my mom and tell her these are my boundaries? This is what I want. Up to this point, I don't want you to interfere. Like that is a very gutsy conversation to have with your African, most African parents.
Yeah.
Just telling them or communicating with them something like that can go really can go opposite really fast, can be taken from a point of you feel like you have grow sana. You do not want to be told arrive, you have arrived. You do not need any guidance or whatever. So I feel like having boundaries with family is difficult. Having a strict, you know how you can be like, okay, I do not want this kind of energy, but because that person is your let's say for example is your sister, you will still take on what they are going through, even if you're going through something, and you can't put it's hard. You can't put like if my sister calls me and tells me she's in campus, if she calls me and she wants money, even if I am struggling, I will find a way to send her money. And I don't know if that has to do with boundaries, but something like that, where you're going through something, but you still take on what your family is going through and you try to solve it, even when you have your own issues. That also speaks to how difficult it is to have boundaries with family. Because there's this aspect, I remember Gina talked about it, like you should put family first. She was having a conversation with somebody, and that chick was like, you can't put your friends first or your guy first. Family comes first. Drop everything for family, which should not be the case.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't give you peace of mind, it doesn't fill in your cup, then it shouldn't be something that you constantly put yourself into.
Yeah.
So I feel like family for me is a hectic one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, family and relationships. Family, because my dynamic of growing up was very different. I've lived with very many different people. And so from that, how I've dealt with family personally is just taking a step back. So if I don't want them to influence a certain thing, I just don't put myself in a space where I need to interact with them as much. So like when I was in school, in primary school, I went to boarding school. Like even during the holidays, I just went to school like continuously. Same thing like when it came to like holidays in high school, I just had things that I needed to do, not to constantly put myself in a space where I felt like there'd be constant confrontation. And so it has been, I think it's one of the hardest thing to put. But for me, how I put that is sometimes just putting distance. So if I don't talk to you a lot, I don't converse a lot, I don't share a lot of what's going on, I'm just like, oh, how are you? You good? You good? Okay. That is it. I don't indulge myself in people's issues, because that's the other thing. That's where also the issues come from is you want to set a boundary, but you're also imposing yourself in other people's problems or other people's businesses. And so before
That's very
you
true.
cut yourself off from that, it becomes difficult because now people think, oh, you're also contributing to this. So how can you tell me not to talk about something in your life, and yet you're here over indulging in mine,
Yeah.
So for me, when it comes to family issues that I know, just take a step back, let the people who need to be dealing with it deal with it. And just that's how I've been dealing with it. With real relationship, and it has been okay for family. It has been hard because family, man. I think it's getting to know how everyone works and how everyone thinks, and so sometimes, actually, for me, it's just how I know people will perceive what I'll say, and it's not an assumption. It's because we have also had an experience with it. If you say you don't want to do something, it's a whole story. If you don't comply with what has been said, then that's also something else. So with that in mind, you just one of the ways I do that is just by avoiding it. And so when they don't have so much control or say, and you're not so much involved with what everything that's happening as much, then there's a bit of it. Kind of creates the anonymity, kind of creates some kind of respect. Like, I don't know exactly how to approach you or like talk to you, but so I'm just gonna be like, oh, hi, okay, what are you, like it's very but I don't think it's everyone in the family. I just think it's also specific people that it's a bit hard to set those boundaries with. Then relationships, I think I set boundaries. The problem is that when I do, yeah, I don't know what men out here are looking for, to be very honest. Because I set boundaries, I think I communicate clearly, and I'm never going to run away from hard conversations. I actually enjoy them. Enjoy like having hard conversations about things in life. And so when I do set a boundary, it's usually like, you're not compromising. You're being too serious. You're do what? Someone just stops talking to you because you've set a boundary with them. What. And so sometimes it becomes really difficult because you're like, okay, I like you. I would want to know you. But maybe this is where, until this point, I think we can engage until now. Or we are past that, or something else comes up and you're like, okay, let's deal with this. But I feel like this is where I don't think I can be able to do this, or, and it's so difficult to set it. It's you communicate it, but how it's received,
That's tricky.
and you can't control tricky. Yeah, and you can't ever control. And even if, because I'm not a shouter and I'm not a drama person, so I'm not confrontational with, actually I've never been in a relationship where I'm confrontational, we're like arguing and everyone is on top of their voices. I've never been. So I'm the kind of people who will sit down, then we're gonna talk about it. And I think because also so with that, I speak and I say what I say, and the other person says what they say. But now, when now comes to me doing it, is either I'm authoritative or I'm something, and yeah. So I wouldn't say it's the hardest part to put. Sometimes it's usually hard because you're like, okay, now if he reacts like this, or if what he thinks like this, and this is something maybe you want to work towards, right? So I think it's quite a challenge. It can be quite a challenge to set it in relationships, mostly where you want something to work out, but because of a boundary you've set, things become tricky. What is your biggest fear in setting a boundary? What is usually like before when you're thinking like, oh, I need to communicate this to someone?
I think mostly the reception. Like
Yeah.
how will they receive it?
Yeah.
And I think that also informs how I will communicate it.
Yeah.
So if it's somebody I know having a conversation with is hard, then I'll try having smaller conversations with them first.
Yeah.
But then if it's somebody who, like, this is not somebody you're heavily emotionally invested in,
Yeah.
like this is a colleague or something like that,
Yeah.
then it's easier to send a communication, an email, a Slack message or something like that.
Yeah.
If they've crossed your boundary.
Yeah.
And this is heavily on, like, things like work, I think it's heavily on time management, if they are kind of abusing your time.
Yeah.
Or if they are making comments that maybe
Spiteful.
yeah. And I've ever gone through this just once, but there was a time I was in a meeting
Yeah.
in one of the areas I have worked in. And then when after the meeting I said, okay, thank you so much. I said, oh, thank you so much. And then the guy said, oh, thank you so much. Like he repeated what I said and mimicked it in a female, extra female way. I felt so irritated.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was being dramatic, but I really did not like it. And I texted him immediately. And I was like, why would you? We just came from talking about something really serious, and I was very serious about what I was saying. Why did you demean my whole presentation by making that comment at the end in front of everybody?
Yeah.
And then we talked about it. We were okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, that kind of communication, that for me was hard. Because usually when I find that you're just not within my energy, I will put space and I won't converse. It will just be, just stay away, So that for me was difficult, but I find that it's easier for setups like those to communicate because you're not emotionally invested at all. But for things, for
Like you're
people,
emotionally
like
invested
you, like James,
Yeah. Now you know. Now you know.
stop shouting.
Now you know.
Like, wow, okay.
And it's not the one who came here. Just saying.
Oh my god.
But maybe he is.
Okay.
Anyway.
When nimechoma. But like with Reggie,
Yeah.
those ones are for me. With my mom, those are the hardest because it's never something you've sat down and been like, oh, I hate this person, they've done this, they've done. It's always a conversation you have with yourself, and you're like, I know they would not have wanted to do it, and I know it was not coming from alikuwa anataka kusema hivyo or he wanted to do that or she wanted to do that. So getting the guts to have a conversation that somebody has done something that hurt you, and because it hurt you, that means it crossed a boundary. That is always a fear of how will you communicate it, how will they receive it, and then after you've communicated it and they've received how does after that look like? Will your relationship still be intact, or will you now start like rebuilding and walking on eggshells and trying to come back to a safe space that you were in before a boundary was broken, So I think that for me is the one thing or two things that give me anxiety about communicating a boundary.
I think for me it's the same thing. Like a bit fear of how the reception would be. So I'm thinking maybe, so what, when I communicate this, how are they going to receive it? And also maybe how will that be? Before I have hard conversations, I take time to think about it clearly, but I also know that it's important to actually have them. Because until you communicate it, what you're doing is making an assumption the other person knew. So since you have not communicated it, if I communicate it once, twice, by the time we're actually on the third one, I'm already spaced out. I'm just like, I already said this. I don't think then I need to somehow like still entertain the same thing. So I have that's usually a bit of my fear, like how will this other person feel and perceive it. But nowadays I take time, think about it, then when I come to express it, because I know we ever had a hard conversation here, or something that happened, which was a communication issue, but how maybe you communicated to me, I felt it was not okay, but for you didn't think, for you it was a joke, but for me it was like, okay, what do you mean? And so with that is also learning how to communicate a boundary is very important. And I think for me, how I'm learning nowadays is saying that this action that you did or how you said that made me feel this way, right? Than saying, wewe unanifanyangia, like it's that action, that action that you did made me feel this way. And then after I set a boundary, like everything, if somebody does something to me that is hurtful, even if I step away, I can still talk to you, but not engaging. But it's the same thing. If I set a boundary with you, it won't be like now something that I hang over your head. We'll just continue interacting, but now with the understanding that, I understand maybe when I did this, it hurt you. When I communicated this way, it hurt you. So next time, I'll know how to better communicate and not make you feel like now we need to be
topsy-turvy.
Yeah. I did that with my trainer, what gym, the other time.
Oh yeah. That was good.
Yeah, and
that was really,
and
really
right now
good.
We still meet up, we laugh, we talk.
Yeah.
But now he understands that for me time is important. If we have agreed for a certain time, then you just don't speak to me the way you want to speak to me. Yeah.
Curate
your language,
please.
Yeah. So that's I think setting boundaries. I think actually most of the people, and something I was reading, most of the times the reason why it's hard for us to set boundaries is also because we have been taught how to be kind.
Yeah.
And how to always make the other person feel good
before you.
Since we are young, right? Yeah. So you'd be told, vaizo viatu ndo uenda kwa mama, vaa hiyo kiatu or something, like your parent would tell you something so that or when you'd say mistaki kufanya, then you're told pana hiyo kitanda nini, True. So every time you would communicate a boundary, actually it would be received with violence. It would be received or somebody shouting at you. So we comparing.
Yeah, but you're not doing this, and then he does this. So yeah, that's abusive. Yeah. So when you think about it.
So you see, we start setting boundaries when we are really, really young.
Yeah.
When a kid says, "I can't eat certain things," and we continuously force them to do it. So and then to be like, usipokula hii mama kuletei tamu, usipokula hii nini. So every action that you do kuna a consequence. And so when you grow up, when you're trying to set a boundary that's difficult, your first thought is that this person will be aggressive, that this person will be kind to you, or this person will receive it well. Yeah. You already made that assumption even before you communicated it, because you have already assumed, and because of past experiences, that this would be something that somebody would be like that. Yeah. Shouting true. At you at. Yeah. So let's also say, because I've said how I communicate my boundaries. How do you communicate your boundaries?
Apart from putting 1,000 kilometers
away. And that's not even communicating boundaries, by the way. That is not communicating it.
That is communicating it. What matters is how are you listening?
No,
listen also with your eyes. Look at the blue ticks. I mean, do I have to write
ghosting.
it? Do I have to write it on what is it called? Like across the sky with clouds. It's not. Ghosting is not. Anywho.
Ghosting is not what you know that.
Let us not get into that one, please. Let us not. So how do I communicate my boundaries? I feel like I'm becoming better at talking about it, especially around things that would hurt me, and also trying to have enough space that I also don't give you access to hurt me or expose myself enough to give you access to hurt me. So I think that if I don't think it's a way of communicating, but it's a way of making sure that that is not crossed. Because you can only cross a boundary and hurt. Like, I feel like you can only hurt somebody when you know, like, there's a vulnerability about them and you can exploit it. So especially with people who are close to you. So I feel that it's not a communication, but that's a preservation of a boundary. You get?
Okay.
You get?
Yeah, I'm a bit on the fence of it, but yeah.
Kiingereza kizungumkuti.
Yeah.
But in terms of communication, I'm not the best, but I do feel like in certain relationships, I won't mention which ones.
We know.
Oh my God. I feel it's better to communicate verbally.
Yeah.
And it's well received every other time. And it comes from the way it's received, it comes from why was that hurtful, like from an understanding point and a point of digging into that so that the person doesn't cross that again, which I really, really do appreciate. But then it also comes the same way, because yes, I do communicate the boundary, but it's also hard for somebody when they communicate that you crossed their boundary. So I also feel like I have that in terms of them being able to communicate if something I did crossed a certain limit and caused them emotional harm or something like that. So I feel like communicating verbally is a good way. I feel like with my sister, my younger sister, we talk a lot. And like nowadays, even if I am going through even if she's going through something and she tells me about it and I'm going through something, I allude to what I'm going through, because I'm also trying to give her a sense of we are in the same boat. In as much as you're trying to figure out what you're doing, life, I'm also trying to figure out the same thing. Like when she asked me about how to save money, I send her links and then I tell her I'm also trying to figure out the same thing. So I feel like in terms of boundaries, it's becoming easier when she kind of crosses one for me to be like, okay, I don't have this right now, but we can plan for this up to this point. You get what I mean? So it's becoming easier to communicate. It's not the most easy because they're still your smaller people, There's always a sense of, even if you're going through something, you want to protect them, you want to keep them safe. And even if you have a boundary, you're willing to give them a leeway for them to come in, even if it would potentially disrupt your peace. But I feel like communicating verbally is becoming easier with time, and also with people who are receptive of listening and receptive of understanding, and also people who would give you the same courtesy of them communicating their boundary and you being conscious that your boundary and their boundaries are not the same. You just need to find a way to balance the two.
Yeah. I think for me, how I communicate my boundaries nowadays is I address an action and how that action makes me feel. And so that's how I communicate my boundaries. Is it hard for me to talk about it? It depends. When it comes to relationships where I know it's important for me to communicate these things early on, as the same thing with them, like I'd respect still when somebody says, oh, this made me feel this way, this made me feel with this way, without saying, when you said about people like, oh, apana, but me, I was trying, without that explanation, just being like, okay, I'm sorry, I overstepped, and I'll make sure that, next time this does not happen. So I also feel like I create space, but I think with time, I've learned, I think for me it has been how to communicate it better, and not, and sometimes nowadays, I don't feel like I really need to, sometimes even if, as much as you want to think about how the other person will react, or say that you want to be in a space where the other person is receptive, you didn't know, but you still need to communicate it. Despite how hard it would be, it's still important to communicate it. Because what happens if you don't communicate a boundary, you become resentful.
Yeah.
towards that specific person, and every time that person would call you or talk to you, be like, Tena, no you, sijui nini nini nini, and start becoming such a toxic space for both of you.
Yeah.
And boundaries are not set to push people away. Actually, they're set to make relationship more healthy. And it's not even about someone hurting. It's just someone can say something that makes you uncomfortable or does not align with your values, or it can also be something that hurts you. Yes, so it's usually just a way on how to make relationship more healthy. It's just that you have been taught boundaries from a place of, if somebody says they do not want this, then you're like, why are you telling me that? Why should I, and stuff like it is always, we have been taught to receive when somebody says a no, to be violent.
Yeah.
Like we have been taught that people should be agreeable to us, and this also comes to when you have different opinions with people.
Yeah.
Or when you're disagreeing with someone, how to be able to respect what the other person thinks, and also just be like, okay, I respect what you're saying, but I think I still...
Yeah, let's disagree to agree.
Yeah, let's disagree to agree. And that's setting a boundary without having to go into an argument, because that's protecting your peace, and you have been respectful of what the other person says than trying to also change their mentality to fit yours. Yeah.
I was listening to a lady, I don't remember her name, but she was talking about how a boundary is like a compass.
Yeah.
So there's and it has only two directions. There's a yes and a no. So if something is a no, like if it's not within your sense of peace and all that, that's a no. So that's crossing your boundary.
Yeah.
If it's a yes, then it's not like hitting at your boundary wall and trying to come in, And then she mentioned that so this compass, like the purpose of this compass, so the purpose of the boundary is to protect you.
Yeah.
To protect you and to protect the people that you care about.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to take care of your compass so that you're not in a space where it doesn't tell you if it's a yes or a no.
Yeah.
It's just, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So like protect your compass. And also she alluded to having boundaries within yourself, like saying, I will work up to this time. After this time, I need to take some time off.
Yeah.
So, and then how you can have burnout.
Yeah.
That's when your boundary or your compass is telling you no, and you're not listening.
Yeah.
Because your body is always speaking to you. I think that's something Oprah says. Your body is constantly telling you something, and you need to pause and listen, because your body can also stop listening to or stop acting on what you want it to act on and shut down.
Yeah.
So she was alluding to how having that compass is the same as having a boundary.
Yeah.
And the only way you can continually protect your boundary or your compass is listening to your compass. If it tells you no, that's a no. If it tells you yes, that's a yes, because at the end of the day, it's trying to protect you.
Yeah. And I think I was listening to Dr. Nedwa. I think I got this from, as I was reading more on boundaries. They're saying to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when it's risky to disappoint in others. And I know sometimes boundaries can sound selfish, but actually it might be what you need for the both of you to be able to work it out, right? It might be what you need. And you also need like boundaries even in relationships. Marriages, in those places where you think the other person should have full access, there should also be set boundaries with amongst the two people, because you're still two different individuals with different interests. You feel differently about different things, right? And even if you don't agree on things, being able to respect that and being able to move forward. Yeah. So I read there are 6 boundaries. There are 6 types of boundaries. So there's physical boundaries, which essentially is about your body. Emotional boundaries, about your feelings, how you feel about things. Time boundary. Sexual boundaries. I think it has been one of the things that has been spoken about, but I also feel like there's a lot of other sexual boundaries that people don't maybe talk about. Then intellectual boundaries and material boundaries.
What's intellectual boundaries?
Intellectual boundary is about like opinions and
also like mental.
Yeah, mental. Okay. How you respect other people's ideas, how we communicate with other people, that kind of interaction. So what amongst these boundaries, which one do you think has been the hardest to keep for yourself and to have for others?
I think for myself is communication boundary, because the loudest voice is my own in my head. Like I have a very loud voice. So having that communication, and I was reflecting about it at the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
Like having, yes, there's a way I won't allow somebody to talk to me, to text me, to, like, I won't allow you to talk to me a certain way. That's a zero. It's not going to happen. But how I talk to myself, I think having boundaries with that, because sometimes I'm very hard on myself. Sometimes I feel like I don't celebrate myself enough. So having a boundary of, Rita, you're not allowed to speak to yourself like that. You're not allowed to put yourself down like that. So having that boundary for me has been a learning process, because it's an internal thing. It's not, it's like trauma. There's a reference that, the book I'm reading, What Happened to You, there's a reference that Dr. Perry makes of when you have trauma, it's like your worldview has been shattered. So it's like you have a ship that's been wrecked, and then for you to rebuild, you constantly need to go back to that ship and collect pieces of yourself. So I feel like that's the same way when you're trying to build a boundary within yourself. You've already grown up to this point like that. So now you need to find a way to structure yourself in a way that is positive for you. So I think that's the hardest one for me. For other people, I feel like I really, really do try to be mindful, because I also don't like people being mindless around things that involve me. So maybe also communicating when they cross a boundary. I think maybe that's the one. I think that one for me. Yeah.
I think for me, I'd say time, because I feel sometimes I have so much on my plate that I don't take a bit of time out, or if I do, it's a kidogo, like an hour a day, and I'm very conscious because I write what I'm doing at every specific point. So I'm very conscious when I say, like, I have to tell myself, at this point I'm doing this, at this point I'm doing this, at this point I'm doing this. And when I don't have anything I'm doing at a certain time, I feel disoriented, and it makes me feel very anxious. So I actually have a planner. That's why I bought a planner, to write it down. When I write it down is better than having it in my mind somewhere. So just write down. I just write down what I think I need to be doing. So sometimes I feel the fact that if I would take time to rest for like a longer period, I feel guilty in a way. But nowadays I'm learning on how to be like, today, or from this time to like maybe the whole afternoon, I won't touch my laptop, and just relax. Because what happens when I'm at a high pressure place, I don't even sleep well. So you'd find I'm having a hard time to sleep because my mind is constantly working. And nowadays having like school, work, side hustles, sometimes I feel like can be a lot. But I also so I think that maybe has been one personally. What else? With people I think more emotional. But I don't know, because I think maybe right now what I'm doing with people is learning how to communicate it better, to communicate my boundaries better. But also time is very sensitive for me, by the way. If we were to meet at a certain time and then you change, when somebody changes something that you had planned, it disorients me fully. I'm not comfortable just saying, oh, let's meet on Saturday, tutaongea like 1 hour to, ama it's 1 hour to, then that's when you cancel. It just throws me off. And it really disturbs me. Or when you decide to meet someone and then someone is like late, late. I really those are and that one I say I'm just like, wait, time. It's either you're paying for this lunch, because and I like respecting people's times too, because it's important. Time is a resource to someone, so you can't just afford to waste people's time.
True.
Yeah. But I'm also learning, I think, how to have emotional boundaries. But I don't know, because I don't also think I talk about things. I don't know if I'm very emotive. Yeah. So I don't know. When it comes to my emotion, I feel like I deal with it more logical than more feelingy. Sometimes I'm a more logical. I'll take my feelings, then logically process them, then deal with them from a logic perspective. Than feeling through it and doing like how I'm feeling about it and stuff. So I think I'm still trying to figure that part out. Yeah. Any last thing, because I know we are good on time.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe you can say one thing that you do to enforce your boundaries with people when you have already set them, or when you have crossed a boundary that you have set with yourself.
I think for people just learning how to communicate.
Yeah.
It's easy to communicate with certain people. It's harder with other people.
Yeah.
But the way Shonda says in her book, the Year of Yes, at the end of that confrontation, that communication, that conversation, that difficult conversation,
Yeah.
there's peace, there's clarity, there's a
Totally.
relationship that has been reinforced.
Yeah.
So just figuring out how to do that
Yeah.
is something I will continually try to do with myself. I try to write it down
Oh yeah, I was
a
about to
lot,
say the same thing.
and I apologize to myself. Like I write it down, I say, I'm sorry I did this, I talked this. Like I'm sorry I didn't celebrate this win that you had an amazing job. I put posts when I'm going through something and I'm trying to heal through it. I put posts for other people, but it's for me. So that's how
I think a lot of people.
So that's how I reinforce my boundaries for myself and other people.
I think for other people, now I'm getting better at saying it. Then if I don't want to do something, if I don't want to go somewhere, I think I'm just going to say I don't want to, despite of how uncomfortable that might be. And also just communicating kindly, but be kind with your words, but firm in your actions. So that's something also I'm trying to do. Is I don't tell someone don't do this, and then at the same time I'm also not very firm in my actions, right? And also learning more about respecting people's spaces and people's boundaries, and just being cognizant of them. Some people, I feel like sometimes in relationship people can say something and then we take it like we don't see it. So learning more about that for myself. I also write down. I like writing down things, how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And then when it comes to like when I have something that I'd said that I'll do and I have not done, or something I had a promise within myself to do and I've not done, I think I just give myself grace.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, so maybe you didn't do it. So next time, how do you do it better? What can you do different? What are the things that you need to change? And then Lydia Kim always says that when you want to be like someone, every day you ask yourself, if you are that person, what would you do to become, to work towards who they are?
Yeah.
So sometimes I also like, if I wanted to be at that level, am I doing what it needs for me to be done now to get to that level? So sometimes it's tough love, and sometimes it's just grace, because so that's what I'd say. I know this topic is huge, and we are going to talk about, or next time we're going to talk about boundaries and compromise. So where does a boundary reach and where does compromise reach? And people who are in relationships, they're not shouting. yeah, they're gonna tell us where that
I
comes
wish they
in.
could hear my eyes rolling.
Yeah.
Right
They're going to tell us where that comes, right? Because that's a very tricky point. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Make sure to follow us on...
We are Phil on our Instagram page, on
Yeah.
our Facebook page, and then on our individual pages at Muihaki Wamboi.
and at Claire Kigundu. We are also on AfriPods. If you listen to your podcast on AfriPods, our podcast is also on YouTube. So make sure that you subscribe and share, and all other podcast platforms. Please share, comment, like, repost. Share with us what you have learned on the comment section. Tell us what you've picked up from this. Share some of your boundaries that you have set, or why you're struggling to put boundaries. We're in this journey together. Hauko peke yako. Sawa. So we love you guys, and bye.
Bye.